Hello, everybody, and welcome back to No More Mondays, the show where we believe you can have a thriving career, business, and an amazing life on your terms. And as always, I am your host, Angie Callen. If you tuned in last week, you heard some exciting news. If you didn't tune in last week, shame on you. And also, here's the news. I wrote a book. It is called Scary Good, Discovering Life Beyond the Sunday Scaries. And it is a book for the burnout, the brave, and everyone in between. It is coming to an Amazon shelf near you on January 8th, and I want you to be in the loop on how to get your hands on it when it does hit those shelves. So head on over to Scary Good Book. No, that's wrong. Scary Good Read. It is a Scary Good book, but the URL is scarygoodread.com/waitlist, and you can grab a front row seat to the action. And today's episode is actually quite timely with the fact that I have a book coming out, and it's a little personal because not only is my book coming out in a few weeks, but tomorrow, yes, tomorrow, Carol Lin releases her book, When News Breaks, a memoir of love and war. I can't wait for you to meet Carol because, yes, we are both writers and we both have news stories hitting the shelves. But when she and I first sat down, we realized how much we have in common, how many common themes are in our books, and just how much we both know what it means to rebuild, realign, and live life on purpose. Her story isn't just about newsrooms and war zones and breaking headlines, even though that's in there. It's about what breaks inside us when the life we built starts to fall apart, and what happens when you have the courage to pick up the pieces. I can't wait another second. Carol, welcome to No More Mondays.
I love that, Angie. I love your book. I'm so privileged to be an early reader, and it is scary good. I mean, I wanted to take notes the whole time, but I wanted to stay in reader mode just to kind of drink it all in. But there are so many great stories, your whole arc. We could just talk about you this whole time, seriously.
Well, we're not going to. We're going to talk about you. And even though I know you are a journalist and you're used to being the one on the other end of the interviews, I really want to dig into, where this book manifested from. So let's lay a little groundwork for everybody. You spent decades in front of a camera before the world of digital, everyone, the good traditional journalism, and working on some really meaty stuff. So CNN, ABC, Good Morning America. There's some accolades here, folks. We are in good company. And I'm wondering, when you were working in what we know is a really challenging, demanding field, when did you start to maybe get these inklings that the career you built didn't maybe align with the person you were becoming, or that reflection wasn't in alignment? When did that start to just take seed for you?
Early on, but I didn't recognize the signs. And I do relate to what you wrote in your book because I think we're very similar in that way. I think we knew before we knew, and it wasn't until things actually broke that we can reflect back and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right for me. So here are some moments, after the San Francisco earthquake, and I was working 24/7, and I loved it. I did. I loved the work. I loved the people I was working with, but I didn't realize that my body and my brain were suffering because of the workload, the stress, a lot of the things that I was seeing as people, bodies were getting pulled out of rubble. And as much as we build this layer, this filter that we try to say, I can do this and I'm tougher than that. And this is my job. And, it's them, not me. And you can tell yourself that so many times, but you don't realize that what's happening inside of you as a human being is it's taking root, this kind of doubt, whether this is a healthy way to live, whether you're processing these emotions, whether you're really recognizing your thoughts. And there was a time, fast forward a number of years, that I found myself on an airplane and I was so exhausted. I just passed out on the flight. And then I woke up and O.J. Simpson was sitting next to me. Okay, O.J. Simpson sitting next to me. He had just been acquitted in his first trial, the murder trial. And for most people, that would be a dream opportunity for a journalist. And instead, Angie, the last thing I wanted to do was talk to this man. And I woke up and I had like drool on the side of my face. And I fortunately fell towards the window and not towards the shoulder. And I was looking at the serrated edge of the knife on my tray because the flight attendant had set the tray down. And I thought to myself, I just want to get out of here. Okay, that's a big red flag. I'm at a network. I should be passing out my business card. I didn't I was so exhausted from flying 24/7. I would drop in on JonBenet Ramsey and then get shot out of a cannon, is what it felt like, the next day to a wildfire or a tornado. And I lived on airplanes the entire time, when the being that I am needs to have space to breathe and process. And I didn't give myself that. So, no, I did not ask OJ Simpson for an interview. What kind of journalist does that make me? And yet my career did move on. And I got to tell you, writing about this for the first time in the book is the first time that I'd ever said that out loud, that I'd ever admitted that I willingly let go of a potential story. Because I don't know, I think by then I was starting to break.
And it's so interesting that you said that there's I have so many visuals, like that I have the visual of you sitting next to OJ Simpson. I also have the visual, in all honesty, of exactly where I was when he was acquitted. I know exactly where I was, because I feel like that's one of those really impressionable moments in time, which, by the way, you were part of many of these as a journalist, and bringing us, really big, and what can feel like it was heavy news, right? So on
Yeah.
top of the fact that, like, you're in a physically demanding, time intensive job, you're also dealing with subject matter and delivering that to, like, the people before you could go look this stuff up on the internet, y'all. That has, like, an extra level of weight, that when we think about this idea of, like, I think I would really realized it early on, but didn't see the signs, or maybe wasn't willing to admit the signs to myself, let alone then actually do something about it. That's a big poo waiting to happen.
Yes, it is. And to recognize, it's not to say that I, as a journalist, or I, as a woman, could not do my job. I want my awards, the accolades of the industry, to speak for themselves when people come to the book. But I wrote the book from a very honest, vulnerable point of view, because I want people to understand that you can win all those awards, you can have all those accolades, you can stand in a war zone. That human being in front of you may not be everything that you see, because over time we build up our protective layers. We begin to lean on those accolades. We begin to convince ourselves who we are and what we have to be, because that train just gets faster. You keep
Uh-huh.
adding cars, pretty soon you're just stuck. And because what else are you going to be? And that's one of the things I really admire about your story, Angie, and I think it's why your podcast and your writing is resonates and will resonate with so many people, because the question that you're asking is, how do you know when? How do you know when it's time to make that change, and how do you find the courage? And you and I talked a lot about grief. So I covered grief for a living. Someone else's tragedy was the currency that fed my story, that produced my live shot, that won me that award. And journalists are criticized for that, but it's part of the job. At the same time, I think understanding and really, and this is where they need to talk about this, I think, in schools. I think young people really need to understand that it's not, the money ain't all that, because trust me, I was making a lot of money at a certain point in my career, and it was never going to compensate for the things that I lost, the time that I would never claw back. And if you make that conscious choice and you build your career on those values, go for it, take it. But I guarantee you, life catches up to us. And when we face that moment of grief, whether it's the loss of a job, or the loss of a home, or the loss of a husband or a partner, it's going to happen. And what in us, in our life experience, has prepared us for that moment? And I lean so much on other people's stories. I was just sailing along on a sea of bad news, right? Because that was my job. But it wasn't until life smacked me down, being after 9/11, and my husband and I making this decision to finally go for a child. Can we have a child? Can we create life and something positive? Um, it wasn't until then, and then 6 months later, when he was diagnosed with a fatal cancer, that it was a giant wake-up call. And it's not to say that professionals don't move through these very serious life events with grace and professionalism and continue on in their careers. But for me, I did not build up enough mental and social equity with myself because I just left everybody behind. I just jumped on a plane and left. And I told people to say no to my boss was never an option. And it wasn't until this child came into my life that I learned the value of that, of the value of boundaries. And I just happened to be in a career where that's not acceptable. You know, fine, have your child, love your child, want to be with your child, want to create routines, but we need you at the drop of a dime. So what you're going to do about that now that you're a single mom, a widow, and someone who, you know, has bills to pay and responsibilities. And this is all you've ever done, Carol. This is who you are. And when it came to a choice between, after losing my husband and going back to work and deciding whether I was going to go to the Middle East and be based out of Jerusalem with a baby, that was the compromise I thought in my head. And then something happens. That was a giant wake-up call, you know. And Angie, when you and I got to talk about grief, we got actually very excited, because I think you and I know that grief is not what everybody thinks it is. It is a whole thing, right? I mean, there's
yeah. And it's not linear.
Joy.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's the master class. It's the greatest teacher that I've ever had. I think it's made me a better, stronger person. And the career that I once had, so many people to this day say, do you miss it? And it's like, no, look at all the exciting stuff that happened after. There's so much afterlife that there is to look forward to. And so, you know, not to lock into this identity that is so carefully curated, that we as individuals, and especially we as women, are so much more than we can imagine.
Yeah. There's so many little pieces in what you just outlined. And the one that stands out the most to me is the irony, or maybe even the symbolism, in the fact that as somebody whose job was to report on grief and won awards on grief, the very thing that finally provided the wake-up call was grief.
Yeah. That teacher, right? The one that we would never invite into our homes or our lives, is the one that is going to show, it's going to be your guide if you let it. If you don't let it define you, that you define you, right? The grief doesn't define you. The career doesn't define you. The money doesn't define you. It is going to be when you take that opportunity and you say, what is this? Why is this happening? Because trust me, when you get a smackdown like that, what do you say? Why me? Why this? What did I do to deserve this? And instead, give yourself that moment. But then ask yourself, so what am I going to do with this? How am I going to get to a place where I can see it for what it is, accept it, and let it lead me? And I'm not talking about, I'm a big believer in therapy. I think people should, there is no shame in seeking therapy. And I do write a little bit about that, not a ton, but I think it's important to acknowledge that there are professionals out there who are trained to help. But to actually create ownership of your own mindset and say, okay, this happened. What am I going to do? I'm going to have a choice here. And somebody once told me, Carol, you need to sit in this. You just need to feel it. And I thought, okay. And then I got a little tired of that, Angie, to be honest. I mean, I was just so sad, which is, sadness is different than grief. I think grief is an ecosystem, and you get to cultivate and curate what you want to get out of the experience, but you have to make the choice. You have to say, I choose happiness. I choose. So for a while there, frankly, I just gave myself some mental space to say, I'm not going to sit in my sadness. I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to stop asking why. And I'm going to say, now I'm going to focus on what, and I'm going to focus on how. And I was blessed to have this baby because she got me up. I mean, she kicked my ass, and babies don't read the room. You know, they only know what they know. But if not a baby, then there'll be something else. You know, I think with you, what I read in your advanced reader copy is you weren't going to allow yourself to wallow. I mean, you gave yourself space. And by the way, one of my great takeaways from your book is for the love of tacos, which is something, it's a phrase that Angie uses in her book. Oh, for the love of tacos.
Well, when you've got a cat named Taco, it kind of works.
Yeah.
But there's it's something I for all of you that haven't picked up on it, Carol and I got to connect a few weeks ago, and like I think that conversation could have been 3 hours. This could have been just 3 hours of like such substantive, meaningful conversation about what it is to be purposeful in life.
Mm.
And what I think is so fascinating about, you said something I think is a really good takeaway, that grief is an ecosystem. And one of the things that we talked about in our not recorded conversation that I actually wish I had recorded because it was a great episode in and of itself is that, you know, joy and grief are so close together. And you
Right.
almost had you had an actual physical example of that, of like the joy of a child with the juxtaposition of the grief of loss. And I also think about joy as being like a state, right? And so it's an ecosystem. And to me, happiness and sadness sit at that same level of like more situational, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am happy about the thing that's happening, but I have joy. I have joy regardless. Or I may be in a state of grief, but I can still choose to, you know, find happiness and instead of the sadness and wallowing. And that's really where
Yeah.
the word choice to me is the
Mm-hmm.
most important word in all of that, is that we choose how we meet these circumstances and the perspective and the agency that we give
Yeah.
them, because you can
Yeah.
choose to be miserable in a miserable situation, or you could potentially look at it and say, how is this happening for me?
And that's the great thing about memoir and nonfiction, I think, is because you've got real life examples. Because I think it's easy for people to look at, frankly, both of us and say, yeah, but you sit in a place of privilege. Look at you guys. You got your bookshelves, you got your,
I didn't have a
you got
bookshelf in the bus, y'all. Didn't have a bookshelf in the bus.
you got all that going on. And when I get to read your book, I see where you came from, all that you had, that you built with, like the mental brick and mortar, the emotional brick and mortar that you put into your life, and all that you lost, and then all that you clawed back. It's easy to say that somebody is superhuman, but none of us is.
Mm-mm.
And we all come from that place. So when you talk about choice, even if it doesn't, like, oh, it's so easy for you to talk about choice. No, I just choose the word. Okay, I choose choice. I'm going to say, I don't feel like I have a choice. I feel like a victim here. I feel like, it's all this is happening to me. But I'm just going to tell myself, even if it's a lie at first, I'm going to feel a choice in this. What do I choose? What do I have the power to choose? And I'm going to choose happiness, even if I don't feel it. And I'm going to allow my brain, our brains are incredible. They're incredible. The capacity that a brain has to heal, to process grief, to acclimate you to a new reality is phenomenal when you look at brain science. So you've got that. We all have that brain going for us. Choose, and then look for the signs, but take action. Self-care and all that good stuff. But getting back to what you said about grief and joy being so, they're like sisters, siblings. And I mentioned to you in our first phone call of, after my husband died, people were worried that if they invited me to a wedding, that it would be too hard on me. And I'm like, no, I want to go. And I experience other people's joy, even to this day, so much more exquisitely, sharply, vividly. I used to never cry at weddings. I cry at weddings all the time because I understand so deeply what those vows mean. And that's what I mean. That's the master class of grief. And I didn't know that was in me. It's not like, oh, I learned this and I'm going to practice it. I remember the first wedding that I went to, and I thought, I wonder how this is going to feel. And I was by myself. I didn't have anyone to go with. And the moment those two looked at each other up there, I just started bawling because I felt like I finally understood. That's what it felt like. Oh my gosh, I finally understand what this means. And that's where it gets exciting, because once you take those first steps, you can say to yourself, this is what I always say to myself when I face something that I'm terrified to do. I'm just going to say, I've done it before, I can do it again. And it's building a portfolio of life experiences where you can say, I can't imagine walking into that room. I can't imagine asking for that raise. I can't imagine defending myself in this awful, ungodly, unprofessional situation. But you know what? I've done it before, I can do it again. And
Mhm.
that only comes with taking the risk of putting yourself out there, not hiding behind the emotion, but get at a certain point, making that choice to get in front of it and saying, that that life experience, it's got your back. It's going to be there for you. And you're going to draw on that.
And if
And I think
you,
that's why we get along. I think that you
well,
and
and
I
because
are
the
already.
hard things, right? For me, it's hard things are going to happen. We can either choose to make them harder or choose to meet them with less resistance and let us learn from them, choose the perspective, and build the thicker skin that makes the next hard thing less hard.
Yes. And I'm curious, when you were writing, how you chose those specific moments. Like, they seem obvious when it's so well edited and so well written, but I'm just kind of curious what was going through your thought when you were pulling
I
those
want
experiences.
your response to the same question too, because I think for me, it was clearly, I don't know that anything specific was going through my mind because I was recalling what I remembered. And
Hmm.
so clearly those memories left some sort of impression on me or were something that shifted a perspective enough for them to be ingrained in my memory and quickly recalled when it was like, okay, what type of story do I have for this stage of life or for this type of this that for like where have I been resilient or like what might be resilient, right? So it was really more about what I was able to like draw out
Hmm.
than, and there was some stuff that like you had to be like, okay, we won't go into that, like got to edit it out, right? And it's because these ones are better representatives of whatever I was trying to show. And so yeah, I think for me it was more about, it was like the natural recall of things seemed to fall into place because those were the things that impressed upon me, the thing I was trying to teach or show insight around.
Yeah. And I think you were badass and vulnerable at the same time. Like when you're living in this bus. Am I giving something too? I mean, there's a whole thing there.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've talked about the
That's a
bus a few
whole
times
arc.
around here, so it might not be complete news to anybody, but yes, there you go. Lived in a bus. Go read chapter 6.
That was so
How
awesome
did
because I
you
could.
how did you work through that? Because there are actually the literal stories, right? That were the core of what you did, not who you were. I'm very careful to say it that way, right? They were the very core of what you did for so long, but then there is actually your story and everything that kind of unraveled through that. I'm curious, how did you go through that same exercise of figuring out like what was the best representation of the moment?
Mm, great question. Because and by the way, you're going to find that a lot of people are going to come to you and they want to write, and they're not quite sure how to approach this. And ultimately, there's a point where the book begins to write itself. I know that sounds really weird because you can't have all things in your book. And so there are some pretty key decisions. And ultimately, what the book land through many, many revisions, it landed as a complicated love story with a career and an older newsman who guided me through it and was so essential to my early identity. And when an editor said, "Yeah, there were a lot of interesting things that happened in your life, Carol. You could tell all these great little war stories. But what is your book really about? I still don't know what your book is about." And that's where I took a scene and zoomed in, and the book begins on the border of Afghanistan. I was in Pakistan on the border of Afghanistan, and there was a moment with a Taliban fighter who was aiming at us with his um, rocket propelled grenade launcher. Now, that sounds like a very classic war story of a journalist, but it became a metaphor for what it felt like to be seen, to be held in the gaze of others, to be judged, to be in the crosshairs. And that metaphor carries through the book, whether it's in my personal relationship with this man who became my first husband, or the career, where judgment was always raining down on me. Um, Ultimately, at the end, how I found my way out. And it wasn't because I had a baby. That's so important. I don't want this to be a feminist or an anti-feminist book, but the decision to show the arc of what it took to become a mother, because I was not a natural mother. There were people in the CNN newsroom who literally told me they feared for my unborn baby because I was like not
Good
loving
thing
the
that was
journey.
not 2025. That wouldn't fly in HR today.
So true. So many things in this book would not fly by HR.
I assumed.
But to answer your question, I think it begins with asking myself, um, what is the book that I want to write, and who am I writing this for? It's not for a mass audience. Ultimately, it was for my daughter, who's now 22, and under living under the gaze of the very systems and people that I understand what that feels like for a young woman, for men to be the judge, for a changing business environment, for to say that you're not, you can be replaced by AI, so on and so forth. And I wanted her to know that let's begin with this idea that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be authentic. And to be authentic, you need to, as much as you look up to me, I need you to know where I broke and how I came back. And no matter what happens in your life, how you can too. So I wrote this for one person, and because I was very clear about that from the start, I think I wanted her to know who her biological father was, and how we met, and how both of us were very fallible, and what a career can do to a marriage and a family, and what a career can do for a marriage and a family. All those things. And I think that's what shaped the book. I hope I'm answering your question.
Oh, this is yes. Because what I think is, well, and I'll go a step back. There's that idea that like everybody has a book in them, but only like 5% of people will actually write it. And that's interesting to think about, like people starting to come out of the woodwork and wanting to write the book. I will totally help you tease out the story, y'all. That's my jam. But I think what's interesting is you have to know, and this is what I struggled with this. And so actually what you said actually resonates is, who is it for? What's the cover is something I struggled with, because I went through tons of different iterations after iteration on just like a manuscript, right? I had typed out a manuscript. Carol, can you still hear me? Oh. Okay, there. You're back. Okay.
I don't know what happened.
I know. I needed, you just all of a sudden went black, and I think I know where to start. Or is it 27? Get it out. Okay. Good. We'll give Jim some work. I'm going to pick up responding to you, and Jim will edit it.
Okay.
What you just said actually resonates with me, because, we always hear about how like everybody has a book in them, but like 5% of the population will actually write it. And I actually look forward to people saying like, I want to write a book. I will totally help you tease out the common theme, because that's the kind of stuff I love to do as a storyteller who likes to find other people's strengths. But what's interesting is I resonate with the whole idea of like, who is this book for? Because I probably have been working on this book in some form for at least 3.5 years. And it was just like, okay, maybe I could take this angle. I could take this angle, but I could never find the backbone of it. I didn't know how to wrap it up in a cover until I finally realized that I wanted to tie it to this idea of no more Sunday scaries. And if you live a more purposeful, values aligned life, that's how it will be. And what I have to say is, you wrote that with one person in mind, but we know that that will have a ripple effect to many other women, not just her age, but people out there who are kind of struggling with similar things. And that's, I think, what's beautiful about it is, we all have something to give to the world, and the impact varies as far as scale. But I like to think that even if one person's life has changed because of the purpose I put out in the world, then I guess I did my job.
Yes.
And so really there you go. Even if that book is for one person, job well done.
Yes. And, I think we talk about book titles, right? So I really relate to the name of your podcast, because there are no, every day is Monday when it comes to breaking news. There's no Saturday or Sunday. But this idea of Scary Sunday, I do remember the latter part of my career, Sunday nights, where it was just this dread of, what is tomorrow going to bring, which is another red flag.
Yep.
When that becomes a regular thing. So that's why I really relate to your titling. And when people read my book, When News Breaks, they think initially, oh, this is about a life of breaking news. It's a, traditional journalist story. there are far more famous journalists who are writing memoirs and autobiographies than I. The book that I can write, and only I can write this book, because it's really about this backdrop of this career, but it's a very personal story of what happens when news breaks in all of our lives. And to understand that it doesn't matter how enriched your career is, it's your inner truest self that is going to have to rise to the occasion, and it can happen under the most impossible circumstances. It really can, and we see it time and again, which is the value of nonfiction and memoir. So I just love this idea of finding beauty in the break. It's how I'm signing my pre-order copies, because I really think that ultimately I want that to be the takeaway.
Love it. Well, and you even said that that through that break, you refound a sense of purpose. And I have found that to be very true. Like in the entrepreneurial world, most of us talk about the fact that we had a rock bottom, and it was only that rock bottom that could have ever revealed a true purpose. And I think some of us try to set out to help others skip that step. But ultimately, a lot of times we kind of need that perspective. And so in maybe an effort to help somebody out there skip the step, I would love for you to just speak into anybody out there who feels like they're maybe in that reckoning. They're going through some form of grief. It could be job loss. It could be divorce. It could be illness. It could be the misalignment, right? That the signs are showing and they're not really willing to like either admit it or do something about it. So what would you tell somebody who is maybe in that middle right now?
That you are more than that broken moment, that you are far more than your greatest disappointment. And the only way that you are going to not only learn that, but the only way you're going to discover that is if you walk the walk, if you allow yourself to grieve, to recognize what has happened, and to commit to moving on, and to really believe, even when you don't believe it, that you have a capacity that is greater than you can possibly imagine. And the only way you're going to know that is to just do it, one foot in front of the other. It is so literal. And I get excited when I say this, because again, I wouldn't wish that tragedy, that loss on anyone, on my worst enemy, if I had one. But it's exciting what comes out of it. And I swear, you are going to surprise yourself. You're going to allow yourself the opportunity to feel a sense of pride and purpose that is going to carry not only you through the rest of your career and your life, but it's going to be the gift that you're going to give to someone else. And when you do, it's going to be so awesome.
You can make your mess your message if you let it.
For the love of tacos, just go for it.
For the love of tacos, make your mess your message. Carol, this has been so fantastic. I want to have like 10 more episodes with you. And I appreciate you being willing to share your story, but the heart within it, and the level of vulnerability that I know is going to help people out there. And I just thank you for being here and talking with us today.
I will be there for you in your launch, January 2026. Anyway,
you gotta love finding the launch friends, right? Speaking of, where does everybody get this gorgeous cover and find out more about this book that is like basically launching right now?
Available everywhere books are sold. I love to support independent bookstores, but it is on Amazon, yeah. Barnes & Noble, and if you go to an independent bookstore, just ask for it.
Love it. Support Carol. We love authors who are willing to share the gritty stories that got them to where they are today, and the purpose that helps them found. So love this so much. And we will put links to this in the show notes and here on LinkedIn for those of you that are watching. So you can be sure to grab your copy, support Carol's launch, because we're in the thick of it right now. We want her to go be at the top of rankings and get all the stars and get all of the bestseller types of things. It is so fun to join the author community and cheer each other on. I love it.
You bet. I'll be there for you too.
Love it. Carol, thank you again for being here today. And everybody out there, I want you to know you never know what blessings will come from the things that seem like setbacks or bad circumstances. Life can happen for you instead of to you if you choose to look at it that way. And I appreciate Carol for being here and to reminding us of that fact. That is another episode. So many exciting things coming over the next several episodes. So you just better tune in, y'all, because you never know what we're going to throw at you. Don't forget to share it if you loved it. Get Carol's book. Drop us a review. Hop on to scarygoodread.com/waitlist so that you can be the first to grab Scary Good, Discovering Life Beyond the Sunday Scaries. And in the meantime, I will see you next week for another incredible episode of No More Mondays.